All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with John and Kathy Zelko. It's August 6th, 2024. We're at Linfield University in McMinnville. And John and Kathy, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
First question to get things started is why wine?
Ooh. Well,
Boredom.
no. When we
You needed a diversion.
we
Not
moved
we,
here
you.
in '83, okay, and we lived in Northeast Portland. My office was right across the street from the Coliseum, and I used to walk to work frequently. I'm a surgeon, and mainly worked at Emmanuel Hospital at that time. But soon after we got there, on Broadway, 16th and Broadway, a shop was opening, and I kind of peered in, and there was this woman rearranging wine boxes, and so I walked in, and it was Rachel Starr, and I ended up lugging home 2 cases of wine, which was another
The shop was Great Wine Bars,
great
remember?
wine bites, and it's still there.
Yeah.
I think John Kennedy still owns it. And anyway, we got to be good friends. And it wasn't, I would say 5 years later or so, maybe 6, she decided to get into the winemaking biz and bought this little concrete nothing out in Linton that Matt Kinney had used for McKinley.
I think it was a former cement mill or
Something like that. But
cement
anyway,
company,
he had been building his own winery under his house where he was, but it took a while. And so Rachel took it over, and she hired Eric Brown to be the winemaker. And they were little people. They needed physical help, and it was interesting. So I would drive out there as often as I could. And
At night, mostly at night. Yeah.
And we'd move barrels and wash barrels and make wine and clean presses and all the grunt work that goes into making wine. And the equipment was terrible, and the wines weren't very good because it was just. I think the first vintage was like 90, and slowly what happened as we went along, she said, yeah, you could use my equipment, so I started buying grapes. And I never had access to good grapes. I mean, who's going to sell some nobody good grapes? But, you kind of learned the biz, right? And then with time, she moved out to Newburgh and got in with what was Bob's last name? He was an Intel guy. Anyway, they bought this walnut drying
It was a
shed.
walnut processing facility on what was the
on Shad Road.
Shad Road, the Shads, yeah.
Anyway, so and that was.
It was another makeshift kind of facility, It was.
But at that time, we got introduced to John Davidson, and he and Mike McLean had bought 100 acres on Walnut Hill, and I'm not sure who he bought it from. I know the Fuqua brothers had owned it at some point, but anyway, they sold 40 acres to an anesthesia colleague of mine who thought he could make that part of his retirement plan, but the government, in its wisdom, said,
No.
things that eat and grow are way too risky to put your retirement money in, which is really true. So he was like, I don't want to pay post-tax dollars on this, and so we bought it. And we'll throw our post-tax dollars into it. And John Davidson and his partner, John Gilpin, who ran St. Joseph's nursery and vineyard service, started. So we started planting. And so we bought it in 95, and we started planting in 96. And I think if I remember right, you got our name from Miguel Lopez, right? Well, Miguel's dad was our vineyard manager at Foreman. And Miguel was out there in the vineyard. He was 10 or 12 years old at the time. he was out there as well, when he wasn't in school. And, things went on. So we started planting various clones of Pinot Noir. It took us until...
Well, the first vintage was what?
No, the first vintage was, well, we kind of had a little partial vintage at 99. It was just private. Our first professional vintage was 2000. And it was under our label, Zelko. By 2001, we had a trademark problem.
There's a vodka company in Maryland called Zelko.
Well, no, it's a Majestic Distillery.
Yeah, but
the
they
brand-
had a brand. It was Zelko.
Yeah.
So we couldn't use our name anymore. So anyway,
Yeah.
so we had to come up with something really quick.
So we hired we wanted a Z, and we actually hired a guy. He was a college.
He was a Slavic studies major at Portland State or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
We were looking because John's dad was Czechoslovakian and he was a big wine drinker. So we thought, in honor of John's dad.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we came up with Zivo,
Yeah.
which means life, or
Yeah.
it also means, Zelko means green. There's sort of a connection there.
And
But
anyway,
anyway,
put an apostrophe in there, and that'll take care of any trademark things.
it has to be unique, right?
Right. Yeah.
The whole winery thing has been, or this whole endeavor was just a real learning experience. And I'm a lawyer, right? I have no idea about the wine industry, but intellectual property, accounting, taxes, excise taxes,
Compliance.
whatever
Yeah.
amendment. What amendment is it that allows the states to govern alcohol control? I should know. Is it the 6th, 7th Amendment? Whatever. Anyway, alcohol regulation is reserved for the states, which is terrible.
Because
Every state is different. Yeah.
But there's even counties within states that are different.
Yeah. Anyway, well.
Yeah. Anyway.
But you have to tell them about the walnut drying facility on Shad Road. It was just Hansen?
So
Bob Hansen.
Bob Hansen had this notion. He said, "Okay, we're going to make a gravity-fed winery," and I was like, "Okay." He actually, I don't know if he'd actually ever been in one. He might have. But
Yeah, there were like a series of 1, 2, 3 levels, right? But they were not connected, so we had to use walkie-talkies. So we would be, I don't know,
siphoning
wine
tanks.
upstairs, and then these hoses would come down into the
Barrel room. And the barrel room, you couldn't use a forklift down there.
Well,
So-
Bob, remember how Bob was?
Yeah.
I don't know. He hit some lights. I mean, he
Anyway.
he drove into some fluorescent light bulbs, and they all broke and shattered. And meanwhile, the water pressure was terrible, right? It was well water, so
Bad well.
so to try to clean the place up, we would get this little dribble. And Rachel was hard of hearing, so it was really hard. We would be shouting at her from the upstairs, like, "Turn the water on!" And she couldn't hear. We'd be running back and forth. And then one time, remember, you got a whole case of bottles. Was it bottles?
Yeah.
It was Bob
We had the bottle. We were bringing bottles on
to bottle.
into the thing, and it was on. The driveway was this rounded chipset, right? And
Not graded well
not
at all.
graded well. So I've got this forklift under this 10 stack of glass.
It wasn't
backing it
you.
up.
Was it
was
you?
me.
Oh, I thought it
And
was
I'm
Bob.
trying to get this thing up this thing, and I'm watching this thing, and finally just.
It was
We
so
only
awful.
lost few cases. But it was.
It was like the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges go winemaking. It's just awful.
I remember we had after one really trying day, we were in slickers pressure washing down this really poorly designed facility, and at the end of it we were just completely fried. And
I don't remember
that's when,
this part.
yeah, and I remember that Ken opened up his new winery in Carlton, and we were like, oh, let's go take a look at this, and we drive in there, and we walk in, and Kathy's looking at these beautiful epoxy floors, full-length drains, and she gets down on her hands and knees and is like touching these things, like, why can't we have this? It's like, we're in this great winery and all the rest of that. It's like, yeah, whatever. It was
Money.
all about
Gotta have
the
lots.
floors and the drains. I mean, because it was just so painful to work in a poor facility. It was awful. But anyway, I mean, and then we ended up doing our winemaking with John Davidson and John Gilpin at Walnut City Winery. So 17th and Evans, right? And that was still a poor facility, but it was better.
Yeah.
One level. There actually were drains. Power washers would work. And, forklifts would work in there. I mean, it was. It was not as much hand.
It was level anyway.
It was level. It was good. And it was easy to get grapes in and out. Easy to get case goods in and out. And what was best was the mobile truck for bottling. And that was a huge relief as opposed to trying to do hand bottling and things. It was just, yeah. So
I think what was nice about the good thing about it was the smell of the barrels and the smell of the wine, if you've ever been part of bottling.
So when you ever fill a new barrel with new wine.
Oh, that oak and vanilla. Oh, just amazing. We were an example of how not to go into the wine business because we had no plan at all. It was kind of like he needed a diversion, and he made good income, so we didn't have to borrow any money, which is great. But we had no clue, no business plan, no. I had no idea of all the, the accounting, the inventory systems, all the records, all the tax returns you had to file, not just your income tax returns, but excise tax returns for Oregon, even though we would never make 40,000 gallons or whatever it is where the excise tax actually kicks in, but they still want to know. And the whole custom crush, I hope it's clarified by now, but when we started out, we had no idea, well, how were you supposed to report this, how were you treated? And you had to engage in this legal fiction of, okay, we're for federal purposes, we're wholesalers, but for Oregon purposes, we're a winery. And we don't have a wine, no, we were a vineyard, right? We were wine growers. I think that was our license. But you had to engage in this fiction where we would sell our grapes to the winery, they would make the wine and then sell it back to us. That's how legally it was supposed to work. It was just ludicrous. I don't know if that's still true, but every time you turned around there was some new form or some new rule that that we didn't know about. It was, but we didn't get into any trouble. It was just plus we were such small potatoes, But he made really good wine. We had and we had fun. We had fun going to trade shows and.
The U.S. Embassy up in Canada hosted the Willamette Valley. We went up there.
We went to Toronto, New York,
New
England,
York,
London.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It was good. And through there, it's an amazing, for as many millions of people involved in the business, I mean, it really is that you're only one step removed from all these other people who know people and so forth down the line. And it was, and you get a real sense of the hospitality industry, which is a hidden, well, it's a mess, but I mean, you want to go out and eat. You want to get a hotel. You want to go to an event, and somebody's got to do all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a huge chunk of the economy that goes into that, and it's invisible unless you're actually part of it, right? So we got to be a little minor part of it, and that was impressive. I have a lot more respect for people who do any part of that. I mean, the wineries, people in the wineries, when we set up Pinot Camp and IPNC, we're setting the tables and we're breaking down the tents and we're doing, and we were doing all of this stuff as well, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And we got to meet all the pioneers of the wine industry. We sold David Lett our Range Rover because he was a British car guy.
He traded you the Range. I think we traded him for grapes.
We traded it for Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Which was, I think we got the better deal. But that year, in 2006, we made, he made Chardonnay, we made Chardonnay, Josh Bergstrom made it, and so did Jason Lett. So it was like all these people made a different version of that Chardonnay, and it was dynamite, absolutely dynamite. So, and it was just, everybody was everybody helped each other out a lot. You could ask anybody for help and they would be like, yeah, sure, right? I mean.
But it was very crude. Remember how shocked you were at all the places that we tried making wine, how the sterility was not, nothing was sterile, nothing was...
nothing was clean. It's amazing that you can actually make a drinkable product, And we lost vintages. Like 2005, we lost our entire vintage to Brettanomyces, just because of poor barrel management.
What do you do?
Well, and the industry was basically moving along while we were part of it. Like, all the microbiology stuff and the DNA probes and all of that stuff was happening as we were doing it. Ozonators, for cleaning barrels and steamers and all the rest of the stuff it was like they weren't there. We started and then they became available and it's like, let's get on board with this. And so
I think it's much more professional now.
Oh, I'm sure. And we were thinking about with the guys at Walnut City, we were thinking about setting up our own separate mobile bottling line, and we said, well, we should get some more people involved in this. So I called up the people at Bethel Heights, and she goes, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And about a month later, they had set one up. So and it was like, fine. I mean, I'm not mechanically inclined, and yeah.
It would be another large investment.
Yeah, so now there's competition for signature. I mean, it worked out well. So.
Yeah.
So let's back up a little bit and talk about life before wine for the two of you. Kathy, let's start with you. Tell us where you're born and raised, and kind of your path into college and career.
Oh, it's nice of you to ask. Let's see. So I was born and raised in Hawaii, and John and I met. Oh, how did we met? We met on a study tour to Europe when we were in college.
Sweden.
Yeah, we both went to Sweden. That was, for some reason, our college had a yearly summer trip to Lund University in Sweden, at the University of Hawaii in Hilo. where we grew up. But yeah, so let's see. So I guess we've known each other since we were 18, 19 years old.
17.
17, really? Anyway. So, but he always knew he wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I majored in English and French. That came in a little handy in the wine business. But and then he went to med school, and oh, I don't know. I worked for a savings and loan in downtown Honolulu for a while, and then one of my friends from school said he was going to go to law school, and I thought, I'm smarter than you. I can go to law school. So while he was busy, oh gosh, I guess I went to law school when he was in residency in Denver. So, and that was a nice interlude too. He had a very, very tough surgical residency in those days. You know, I saw him like every third night, and when I did see him, he was asleep. So it was nice to have something challenging for me to do, and then I finished law school, and then I had one more year. You had one more year of residency to go, so I took an extra year and got a tax degree. So in some ways that kind of prepared me for John's hobby, going into the into the wine business, although it was really very shocking to have such a mishmash of state and federal regulations that govern the wine industry. It's not like federal tax law, which is clear, lots of precedent, lots of guidance, you know, clearly drafted legislation by experts instead of a mishmash of, well, let's sort of do it this way. Anyway, so, but yeah, our accountant didn't know anything about wineries and vineyards, so that was a whole, you know, there's a whole IRS manual on how to deal with that. We hired a bookkeeper. She didn't know anything about inventory management. But, you know, so for anybody going into the business, it's great to go to school, learn all this, hire an accountant that knows what they're doing. We were just feeling our way the whole time, you know.
Or marry a tax lawyer.
Yeah,
you know,
right, well.
Okay.
Well, and then I have to listen to the nonstop complaints about just what a mishmash it really is.
Yeah, right.
That
Why did you ever get into
in
this?
business. And dealing with the accountant who goes, this is crazy. This makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the poor bookkeeper, you know, she just could not grasp the idea of, no, anyway. But it's okay.
Tell me about the non-wine part of your.
No, the non-wine
career.
part. Well, I landed in estate planning and probate work, which is very, very gratifying. And I'm still doing it, trying to wind down. But yeah, it's a very. It's also very challenging, very complicated. Lots of family drama sometimes, but it's very rewarding and usually non-confrontational, and challenging, always changing. So, yeah, I like that. And then in my other life, I take care of my sister and I take care of my mother, who's 102 and a half and still living on her own. So that's our life right now, and that and dogs. We love dogs.
Always have.
I don't know. What else? Well, John started after he retired. He retired, or he knew he was going to retire, so that's when we sold our vineyard, because we figured he was not going to have the income stream coming in, and you just never know. Vineyards are like farming. You have no idea when something terrible is going to happen, and you're going to have to, I don't know.
Pony up a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we sold the vineyard to, it's Page Wines.
Well, yeah, David Page.
David Page.
Yeah, when he left Adelsheim, he got some investors, more docs from the Midwest who needed to do
A tax-free exchange.
Right. So yeah, and he's doing well with it.
Yeah.
So is that the RPG vineyard? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
John, tell us about your life before wine. You said she said you knew you always wanted to be a doctor. So tell us where you were born and raised and about your kind of path.
So when my dad was in medical school in Canada, in Montreal, that's when I was born. And he had been a Spitfire pilot. He was an American, but he joined the war early.
So he could fly.
He got the GI Bill. And so in Canada, so that's where I was born. We moved back, and we moved constantly. The first 8 years until we landed in Hawaii. Not too long after statehood. It was like 62, 63. Mm-hmm. And so, I went to school there and went to the University of Hawaii. That's when I met Kathy. And then medical school in Hawaii, state tuition. We were actually able to work our way through college. I was back in the days before Reagan, so that college tuitions were affordable. You're born too late. I just want you to know that when I started college, the 1971, I got kicked out of high school, so I started early, and it was $90 a semester. And then when we finished, my last semester of medical school, it was $1,500 a semester, and I was outraged. Because we ran a yard maintenance and house cleaning business on the side in order to pay for all this, and it's like, how many yards we got to clean to make $1,500? I mean, it was pretty impressive. But yeah, we were able to get out, without debt, right? Which is gold. I mean, it's just huge. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And
John skipped a bunch of grades when he was a kid. So you were kicked out of your prep school, so you didn't get your high school degree, and then he took all these advanced classes. We never got a bachelor's degree either. But I don't know, University of Hawaii had a program or something where you could go in early. I don't know, somehow you got into med school. So he was quite young when he came out. And he got his surgery residency that he wanted the most, which was in Denver, where they were doing liver transplants. That was the big thing in those days.
And trauma.
Trauma, yeah.
Why were you interested in surgery specifically?
He's not a tinkerer.
No, basically, I didn't actually have a great understanding of what I was going to do once I actually got into medical school. But you during your third and fourth year, you do rotations in all these specialties, right? And surgery just really appealed to me. Now, you have to appreciate that this was when Kaiser in Honolulu was on the beach next to the Ilokai Hotel. And, Henry J. was no fool when he bought real estate. And so I would get there in the morning with my chief resident, and we would, we'd do rounds, and then we'd take a break for an hour at lunch, and we'd surf, and then we'd go back and we'd, finish up, and then we'd go across to the Ilokai Hotel bar, and we'd hang out, and rinse and repeat, right? And I thought,
that's not why you went into surgery.
It's pretty, and I really enjoyed the surgery. So I mean, and I like working with my hands, and it's very gratifying to have somebody who has a problem, you fix it, it's done, right? I mean, it's not like, well, we're going to put you on your medication for your diabetes, your high blood pressure, and we'll see how it goes, right? There's a very nice sense of completion and gratification, right? And I can remember when I was doing medicines, this guy bleeding to death from an ulcer, and they called the surgeon. And the surgeon goes in and goes, yeah, all right, hang on. And, 30 minutes later, he's in the operating room, and 2 hours later, he's in the recovery room, and the problem is solved, right? And everyone else was sort of wringing their hands, pouring in blood, and blood is coming out. It's kind of like, put your finger on the stop, and fix it, right? So that was very cool. Yeah, very gratifying.
To cut is to cure. Remember that?
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. Well,
that was good.
So what brought you to Portland?
Yeah, so we tried to figure out, we initially thought we'd go back to Hawaii, But the year before we finished, we went back, and it was like, oh my God, Hawaii is at least 20 years behind. I mean, it was pretty sad. And I was like, we both had high-powered training. It's like, we can't do that.
Yeah, he didn't want to do lumps and bumps, and I didn't want to do traffic cases and divorces. And
Yeah.
so, you know.
Yeah. So we tried to figure out where to go, right? And, you know, at the time, so we looked at the map, right? I mean, you know, I'm not going to go down to the south, you know, they're all assholes, and can't go to the northeast, they're all assholes. California's full of assholes. And Colorado is just too dry.
I don't think you should
and
use
so I read Sometimes a Great Notion. And I said, oh, there's got to be a job out here in the Northwest. And I knew that a guy a couple years ahead of me,
Oh,
Dave,
yeah. Don't say his last name.
yeah.
But
Anyway, I knew
he was in Portland, but he got into trouble. He was dating too many women or something.
Well, when I tracked him down, I knew he was with Kaiser. I called Kaiser, and they said, "Oh no, Dave went down to Long Beach." And I actually tracked him down to Long Beach. This is 1983, right? So there's no internet. I mean, this is like, you got to do some legwork, right? And I call him up and I go, "Dave, how's it going?" He goes, "Oh, it's great." I said, "How's Long Beach?" "Oh, Long Beach is great." I said, "Well, how's Portland?" He goes, "Oh, Portland was great." I said, "Dave, you're now in Long Beach. What happened?" He goes,
It's a very small town, he said.
Because my only form of extracurricular activity was cheating on my wife, and within 6 months, I couldn't go anywhere. I had to leave and go somewhere. Now, you have to realize that Dave's wife was a supermodel. I mean, she was absolutely stunning. And it's like, okay, well,
So,
right.
so anyway.
Yeah, anyway, so.
But I think he said such
He
and
said,
such.
actually, he said, "I was offered a job at this clinic. Let me give you the contact info." So I did call, and and they said, "Oh yeah, come on out." And so I interviewed, and it was called the Metropolitan Clinic. It dissolved in September of 1999.
Did it?
Unfortunately. Yeah, we got too big too fast. But there were two guys from Hawaii there, two Chinese pediatricians. And there's a standing joke in Hawaii, which is, if you're going to go in business with some Chinese guys, if they're smiling, jump in, because you know you'll do well. And so I called Kathy, and she said, I mentioned these two guys, and she said, "Well, were they smiling?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, did you sign the contract?" I said, "No, I called you first." She says, "Just sign it."
Yes.
So anyway,
and it was they were great people. I mean, it was a wonderful, family-oriented, just
Yep.
straight arrow people, good docs.
Yep.
And,
yeah.
but yeah, we were going Portland. Where's Portland? Is that in Washington?
No, yeah.
Is it in Oregon? We don't, no idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, but we loved it. We loved it. The minute we got here, we loved it. And partly because it was so green compared to Denver, which was so dry and dusty and brown.
And we grew up in Hilo, and Hilo gets 200 inches a year of rain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never not green, right? So it felt good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you got your start in wine just by kind of showing up and doing some work. So tell me about that, about starting to learn the science or the physicality of winemaking. What drew you in, and what kept you coming back?
Well, we like drinking wine, so I mean, let's start with that. But the microbiology of winemaking is no mystery to me, because I mean, microbiology was, that's what I did most of in college. So the idea about fermentation and all of that stuff was, fun. But the whole physical process of taking a bunch of grapes and finally ending up with a product in a bottle is a lot of work, a lot of steps.
He tried making it. Remember, you bought some Gewürztraminer, and you bought some other wine from a guy. Was it great? Anyway, all I remember is this big garbage can filled with juice.
Yeah.
I don't even know how we got
it
it home.
He was a plastic surgeon who had a vineyard on Germantown Road, and
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and actually came out okay.
Yeah, it was all right.
So, and then they had secondary fermentation.
Oh, it was Mueller-Thurgau. That was terrible.
That was terrible. No, we got that from Myron.
Was it Myron?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's all they had left. And we ended up with our vineyard just on the other side of the hill from Myron. He used to walk over sometimes and with his wife on a morning constitutional and say hi. Yeah, we have Myron stories too. It's like, but anyway, yeah. But I mean, I needed something as a combination of an intellectual and physical break from being a surgeon. Something as far removed from that as possible. And I didn't play golf.
We don't have children either.
We don't have kids,
So.
right? So that was huge. And yeah, so
Just kind of got out of hand.
did. Well, we tried sailing, and you nearly killed me when I dumped the boat in Vancouver
Yeah.
Lake. So it
That
wasn't
didn't
going to be
work.
sailing. So we had to do something else. And yeah, so yeah, and the other part about it is, it's just.
We just met the
cool-
greatest people.
That's
Yeah.
it. It was the coolest people in the world. I mean, grape growers and winemakers and
Even vineyard workers.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I mean, you couldn't ask for a greater group of people to play with, right? Just
yeah, and very different from our professional lives.
there's always something to learn. There's always somebody new to meet. There's always some nuance. I think the collegiality in Oregon was really impressive. I mean, I went to one of the steamboat sessions with a little bit of trepidation because I had heard, some serious horror stories about what a kill session was. And then when I got down there, I realized, compared to the kill sessions we used to go through as surgeons when we'd analyze mistakes, they were just nice people. There was no blood drawn. And it's not life and death, right? I mean, it's just people, that's why they don't have media down there, right? So that you get a chance to talk about problem solving, critiquing wines in a way that you should take the criticism well. And I have no doubt that everybody who's been through one of those things made better wine after that. Just because you get 50 opinions from 50 very good people. And how often do you get that on any piece of work? Right? I mean, you just don't. So, yeah. And the fact that the industry bothered to put it together, it's great.
So you mentioned learning to make wine in some interesting places. So tell me about getting comfortable with the process of making wine and seeing your wine start to improve. So what was the first time you made a wine that you were happy about?
Well, I think we made a solid B wine our first go in 2000. 2001 was not. We had too much new wood. 2002 was pretty good, but again, too much new wood. I think by 2006 things were really coming along. We really kind of started making A- wines in 2008, and I would say most of the years we were, when we would get scores, they'd be, 87 to 94s. 90 was not uncommon, which, never mind what people think about scores and everything else, but when you watch your progression of your own things, I would say those scores were all very accurate in the sense that you watch your progression of things getting better. It's kind of like playing any sport, suddenly you get you understand your facility, you understand your barrel program, you're getting your vineyard dialed in because the grapes are getting more mature, so that there's less year-to-year variability independent of the weather, right? So all the clones that we planted were all hitting middle age. And they also did everything that David Lett said they would do, which is by about year 15, somewhere between 15 and 20, the site dominates, the clones don't. And so now the wines become, it's easier to make a consistent wine, and you don't have to fuss so much. So I would say that. And then when we started planting the Pinot Blanc, right out of the gate, we had some stunning Pinot Blancs. It's the rarest clone of Pinot Blanc ever. It's a white mutation of a Pinot Noir called Pinot, it's colloquially known as Pinot Gouge. And it was one of the trench coat clones that got smuggled in, fortunately virus-free. Anyway, and it's being propagated, so we're really pleased with that.
Tell me about let's talk about the vineyard for a minute. You mentioned obviously buying it and starting from scratch. So tell me about the land as you saw it first. What did it look like, and what did it take to get it to where you wanted it to be?
It was in winter wheat, and it starts off at about 200 feet and goes up to about 400. So about midway up the vineyard is when you get out of the Missoula flood alluvial soils and you get into the Yamhill series. And I know they keep changing the names on that, but it was basically Yamhill B and C, which back in the 90s was what it was called. So it's degraded volcanic soil. The water restricted hill, we dropped 4 wells on it. And 2 of the wells produced, and we got a smashing 9 gallons a minute. It was nothing. It's very hard to irrigate. We didn't irrigate much, 2003, and we would irrigate the babies. Once we got down into the alluvial soil and changed rootstocks, we didn't have to, well, we irrigated very little.
I think it's thriving though, isn't it? I think it's thriving now. The vineyard is really thriving.
No, it is. We had to replant a patch in the center. When I bought it, and people heard that I bought it, they said, "What are you going to do about the rock?" And I said, "What rock?" And I said, "The rock in the center of the vineyard." And I'm like, I've walked
The
over that,
rock
right?
that the rocks that has flipped a dozen tractors.
No,
Something
so
like that.
apparently the Fuqua brothers had this bare rock there, and so they said, well, we got to get rid of this rock. So they got a D12 and they put a huge chain around this thing and they took off and they flipped it. And it's like, and then they realized that was not a rock, that was planet Earth. It was this massive basaltic uprising, and they
Ants.
the lever wasn't long enough. So they, rather than dynamite it or do anything, they just simply covered it up. And so there was this very shallow area of soil. And when we started digging, to put in our 777, it was like, boy, this is pretty skimpy here. And we had to plant some parts of it 2 or 3 times in order to get that to go off. But
it's a lovely site. It faces what? East.
East. Yeah, you see a great view of Mount Hood, and
yeah, it's
and
sloping
so
down. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And when was the eclipse? We had a big party when there was a total eclipse.
Yeah.
It was just
17?
2017. That's right. We had a big party. We all hung out on that slope.
Yeah.
And it got dark. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
The totality came through. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
How did you decide what to plant?
So this was the time when, so mid-90s, right? And the huge hype and buzz at the time was Dijon clones. Dave Adelsheim had come back from the University of Dijon, and somehow he had finagled to be able to get these clones in there. The world was a colder, darker place then, and the standard clones on a good year would ripen well, and on a bad year, not so much. And so everybody wanted something that would ripen about 2 weeks earlier. And so the Dijon clones came in, right? And they were available. So, and everybody was hot for them. So, yeah, so 115, 777, 667.
Pomard.
114. 114 was probably a poor choice for that site. And then we put in Pomard, not the heat-treated Pomard, but the regular Pomard at the bottom, which did very well there. And now, of course, we have global warming, right? So all the Dijon clones are being top grafted over to the old clones that take longer to ripen, which makes perfect sense. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was 30 years, right? One generation is all it takes. But there was a huge amount of I think it was the right thing to do to plant the Dijon clones. Everybody said you need 115 and 777, and then whatever else you put in, it's kind of like, who knows? We'll figure it out, right? And some of them were way more available than others in terms of just graft material. Some of them were just exotic, and everyone was like, I don't know what we were going to do, but it doesn't matter, you can't get it anyway. So, and I'm like, fine, whatever. I mean, I've got 1,925 plants per acre. I need graft material, so I'll take what I can get. Right. So, and then we ended up top grafting 1 acre of the 114 into Chardonnay at the end. And the smart thing to do that we did was we had 3 separate clones on that 1 acre, so we had this great field blend, and that did very well. Those guys who come up from California and do all that top grafting, and they're pros. That's amazing. The graft take was huge. So
Kathy, you talked a little bit earlier about your role in this, especially in the winery. Tell me about starting to get your hands dirty, and what did you think of the work?
I wasn't very good at it. I still remember when we were at the walnut processing facility, and he'd be on call, and somebody had to punch down the wine, So I would go out there by myself in the dark. Or one time my mother came with me. Just, don't fall in. Because, you have to stand on these planks and, yeah, anyway, that was not fun. I didn't fall in. I think I lost an earring, but anyway, that's minor. I figure it will come out in the wash. So, no, I quickly just stayed in the back office, and that was bad enough, because, I had my own challenging practice to run, and then on top of it, I'd be doing these stupid, ridiculous, useless reports to OLCC or whoever, or try to figure out the logistics of getting wine to Florida, which is one of our biggest markets. And boy, now they ship straight to Florida, but we had to get wine from Portland down to Grosskopf warehouse down in California, and then from there off. And your whole fate of your shipment is based on some clueless clerk somewhere who doesn't know anything about Oregon or doesn't know anything about the particular warehouse's procedures and stuff. It's just maddening. But it's okay. It's fun to have something else to do, something different to do, and nobody's going to die,
Right.
Nobody's going to die. No, I'm not going to get sued, I'm not going to make a terrible mistake in somebody's estate plan. So, the risk is fairly low. It was just aggravating.
What about selling wine? Tell me about having wine to sell with your name on it. What was that like?
Frustrating. We got burned by so many distributors because, my standard quote is that the wine business is flaky as a croissant.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous number of very well-meaning, passionate people who can't run a business. And so distributors would come and go, leave us in the lurch because we were a tiny brand. And so big guys don't want us, right? And especially after the crash, man, they were dropping labels right and left. And so, we did better with brokers, even though it wasn't as
They
lucrative.
take their cut, yeah.
But in Texas and in Florida, Florida became our biggest market. And yeah, we had a great broker and very well respected, worked with good people and good distributors, and you know, we moved a lot of product, and it was fun to go do wine dinners and wine shows in Florida, especially in the wintertime here, you know, get out of the rain and, you know, get in some sunshine, and it's good. And
But to be successful, you really have to have a full-time sales
yeah,
staff, and he couldn't do it, and I certainly couldn't do it. So
no, from an economic standpoint, as I was flying in and out of airports in multiple places and seeing my colleagues in the wine business, you know, I mean, they were spending 30% of their life on the road, you know, small wineries, you know, husbands and wives and kids, you know, selling wine. And I'm like, compared to being a surgeon, I mean, don't give up your day job to run a winery unless you're at a size, you know, Willamette Valley, you know, King Estate, somebody where you're so big that you can hire a massive staff to, you know, get that through. You also get economies of scale that way in terms of, you know, your just the basics of doing your business, right? Bottles, labels, corks, et cetera, closures, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's, I can see why a lot of small wineries here sell the brand if they can, and why so few children of the original winemakers, you know, say, oh yeah, I'm going to take over the biz and go from there. That's kind of the exception, not the rule, and it makes sense.
You mentioned earlier trade shows and obviously winemaker dinners, things like that. So tell me about what it's like being in front of people when they're drinking your wine.
We always enjoyed that. I mean, you know, whether it was, you know, the Thanksgiving or the, you know, the pre-Christmas things, or, you know, at IPNC.
well, our wines were good. You
Our
know,
wines were good.
I don't think we ever had any criticism, really.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean,
And,
I think people, the further you went away from Portland, the more appreciative people were, less educated, but just happy that you're there. And so when you walk down, go into Florida, and there's this endless list of big reds from all over the world. And then there's some guy from Oregon, right? You get a lot of attention, get a lot of placements that way. And people really enjoyed it. I mean, people in Oregon are, between here and France, I mean, they're the most educated Pinot drinkers in the world. Nobody comes close. So here, the critique is pretty intense, but friendly. As you get out further and further, people are like, oh my God, we like your Pinot. And it's nice. And, you know,
Well, there's
we're
something
used to
so-
dealing with the public because I'm a surgeon, she's a lawyer. You have to be able to deal with people in a professional way, and you're, you know, I mean, it's not, that part was not different, right? You're selling yourself, selling your product, you know, you stand behind it.
Tell me about balancing. Obviously, you mentioned wine started as a diversion for you. Obviously, as it got more and more intense, tell me about balancing the careers. How did you make the sort of the time work and the energy work?
oh, you just make it work. I don't know. I mean, well, our professions came first, always, but it was more of a diversion. There's something so romantic about Pinot Noir, you know. It's such an elegant wine. You
It's a very expressive wine. I mean,
expressive. That's it. Yeah.
and what we did is, we're not that far away, so we would come in at night and on the weekends.
Yeah.
And as we got more into it, I mean, we had professional vineyard management, right? So I mean, I wasn't driving a tractor, right? We had winemakers. I did a lot of the winemaking early on, but as volumes went up and my ability to acquire more knowledge in the winemaking process tapped out at a certain level, and I said, okay, I'm a good B+ winemaker, but I need to make more consistently A wines. So we linked up with people making A wines, right? So, and we split it up. So, Drew Voigt made our Pinot Blanc, and Patrick Reuter made the red and the rosé, and then we had one year, our final year, we made bubbles, and
They're all wonderful.
And they're all
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
We had, Jay Alvin take care of that, right? Because that's a whole different process, right? So I mean, it was great to link up with people, because when you go through and see what they're doing, and like with my level of knowledge, I wouldn't have done it that way, but I appreciate what they're doing, right? I mean, it's like any other field of knowledge. If you're not willing to put 100% of your time into it, you're gonna tap out pretty quick, right?
But it's nice to have a product at the end that
Yeah.
is tasty. What is that? What's that last thing you just bought? Your Pinot Blanc.
So Ryan, I went tasted through Dominio 4 with Ryan, and they had bought a bunch of our Pinot Blanc from Dave Page, and so they were, had the 2023 vintage and still in élevage, and I was tasting through, and I'm like, and we'd almost drunk all of our Pinot Blanc that we had, and I'm like, yeah, so we'll buy half. So we're going to buy a couple of barrels, and when it's done, they've done a fabulous job with it.
See, that allure is always there. It's dangerous for us to come out to wine country.
So anyway.
What were your initial impressions of Oregon and the wine industry and the people making it when you got here in the early 80s?
Oh, they were like two good wineries. And there were no microbrews, right? And the wine sucked. I mean, seriously, it was, everybody was working hard, but there were two major problems. Number one was
It's too cold.
it was too cold and too wet, and too dark, and the equipment and the vineyard management at the time was kind of California style, which was not well suited up here. It was too shaded, and the equipment to process grapes was too brutal. They were grinders. They were not delicate destemmers, and the cooperages were not here. And part of the problem,
Are there cooperages here now?
well, there's Oregon barrels, but the number of barrels that were being purchased in Oregon was so small that there weren't brokers here to supply a lot of wood, right? It was tough. David Lett's Pinot Noir program was old school, and the problem was the American wine palate was for a much richer, bolder flavor, even in the world of Pinot Noir. And so it took another 10 years for the world to heat up, and to have a whole bunch of more people come through. I mean, Bob Parker came through, and he came through because Rachel
Oh,
Starr
right.
invited him. He actually stayed at
right.
her house, and that's why his brother-in-law started Beaufort.
Right.
And yeah, it took it to a whole new level. What we needed was a lot of competition from people who are pros, right? And when Domaine Drouin came in with Robert, that set new standards in terms of what you could do. It also started parceling out the AVAs, which was a big deal because people started paying more attention to the microclimates. But I mean, really, when we first got here, yeah, we would not drink Oregon wines. I mean, there were some whites. Myron in particular made some awesome white wines, and we would buy those. But most of the Pinot vintages were, I mean,
Thin,
yeah, well, and yeah, I mean,
astringent.
81 and 83 were terrible. And that's when we got here. You know, it's like, oof. Yeah.
So global warming has been good in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what made you decide it was time to to step away and sell the vineyard?
Oh, I retired. Yeah, I mean, you know, a vineyard is a large hole in the ground in which you throw money. I mean, seriously, it's at our level of production and grape growing, and we would sell grapes, and yeah, that is not that. You know, if we could even break even on that, we would have kept it. But that wasn't going to happen. And also at the time, you know, the price of grapes was dropping like a rock because it had been so overplanted by everybody else. So the idea that when you want to farm an organic vineyard or biodynamic, the costs on that per acre, yeah, it would be really hard to break even on grapes with that.
So tell me about
It was time.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to, it was time.
It was time. When you stepped away, tell me about what you saw the industry look like at that point. What were the biggest sort of changes from when you started to when you sold?
Oh,
I think the biggest one was the number of seriously large professional winery operations coming in, buying up big tracts, and putting out a lot of wine. Each time one of those happened, whether it was American or French, they raised the bar for everybody else. They also, having all that capital moving through, changed McMinnville. I mean, and Newburgh, and you know, businesses coming in that were supplying equipment and products to the wine industry suddenly became high-end as opposed to, you know, you get what you get. And vineyard management became much more specialized and more expensive, but you got a much better consistent grape. So I mean, overall, the maturation went from a scrappy band of amateurs to, no, I think we can pull this off, to it's established. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think when we left in 2020, that was, yeah, I sort of thought of us as kind of like the end of the second generation. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the third generation is just, you know, kicking it.
So what have you been up to in retirement?
oh, I'm not retired, but he's always got something going on.
Yeah, so I did a couple of things. I was going to travel, but then COVID happened, right? I mean, literally, boom, right then and there. So in the meantime, I had taken some Japanese knife making classes, and so I had, and I've taken subsequently some blacksmithing classes just because I like working with my hands and metal. And I never used power tools while I was working because that's my livelihood, right? And so it was fun to pick up, you know, inanimate objects and make more stuff out of it. And I still like gardening and farming, and so we bought 2 acres of land between Lebanon and Sweet Home, and I cleared 2 acres of blackberries, and we put a house up there and got one of my brothers planted there. He's a farmer, and so we're kind of doing a food forest down there.
Yeah, I never know what hobby he's going to take up next, but I know it's going to be messy.
Yeah.
Tell me about the plans for the future for the two of you. Anything on the horizon that you're excited about?
Oh gosh, we really want to travel, but I'm kind of tied down with my mom, and his mom's still alive too. She's what, 98? 98. So we have this strong female side of it.
Yeah. Well, the men die younger because we can. So it's like,
yeah. So, for now, we just, I'm busy, I'm very busy, so that's no problem for me. I'm never bored, but yeah, he keeps acquiring new hobbies.
When it's time to travel, where do you want to go?
Oh gosh. Well, we haven't seen very much of Europe. I'd like to go there. We like to go hiking. We had a wonderful hiking trip to Iceland. That was just great.
and Scotland. And the West Islands of Scotland.
And Scotland, yep. So, yeah, and we can do that. We can do Japan.
The Dolomites.
Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. There's a couple in the Southwest Hills where we live that run hiking tours all over Japan. Anyway, so yeah,
And with
hopefully we'll stay healthy and happy. And
yeah, and with any luck, my favorite boat captain, Lorenzo, will get back in biz. He got creamed by COVID, but I had done this nice, with another couple, sailed around Sardinia in a 40-foot sailboat. That was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. I had never really sailed on the Mediterranean before. That's gorgeous.
yeah,
Last question for the two of you. Tell me about biggest accomplishment or proudest achievement as you look back. What makes you happiest? What are you proudest of?
oh my gosh. I don't think I have anything large. No, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. You just got an accommodation from.
Oh, I have a, no, not, no, I'm getting a little service award from the Oregon State Bar, but that's,
Congratulations. It's really nice.
yeah, well, it's, when you get to be our age, you realize this, we have a lot of knowledge that it needs to be passed on, so. Yeah, so I was running a study group for many, many, many years, and I do try to be mentors to younger lawyers. It's very gratifying. No, we don't think we have anything big achievements. I went vegan. That was a big, but kind of puts a cramp on where we can eat out. But I'm much healthier.
Yeah. I went vegan for a while.
But he goes out and he goes to the store, and I look on the little receipt that comes back, and it's like a top, a tri-tip steak or a chicken. He has to eat in the car, I guess. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's okay.
We call it a vegetable.
He calls it a vegetable.
But in terms of accomplishments, I did 36 years as a surgeon, watched Portland evolve. I was part of the original level 1 trauma service at Emmanuel when there was no trauma service in 1983. Things were very primitive. I came from Denver, which was a major trauma center, and I didn't realize that the rest of the country was not at that level. It was impressive. But then, much like in the wine industry, Portland, Oregon sort of became noticed, right? And so professionals from every medical and surgical specialty moved in, and the whole level of of care, you know, at a tertiary care level skyrocketed tremendously. And it was great to be part of that. It was very gratifying because things were very sketchy back in 1983. I mean, at many levels.
When at my first law firm in '83, maybe it was '84, right? But one of our clients was a middle-aged woman, and she was attending a concert at Reed College, and it was a hot day, so people were sitting on their dorm rooms, sitting in the windows, listening to the music. So she was, I don't know, maybe one of her kids or a friend, but she was sitting on the windowsill, and she fell out, hit her head, and died because they took her to the closest hospital, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Eastmoreland. Eastmoreland. They didn't know what to do with her.
Well,
and she just basically died.
It was,
yeah.
The law was, it was scoop and run to the nearest facility, the idea being that all facilities are equal. Well, they have no neurosurgeon, and they didn't know enough to to get her in an ambulance transfer to some other place. Well, that was the index case for the people at Emmanuel and OHSU to go to the legislature and say, this is not
her son sued. Her
Right.
son sued too. That helped.
Yeah.
But
those are the kind of, and so suddenly we have a level 1 trauma center, right? So 2 of them. So I mean, it was a big deal. And then you get the helicopters, and right.
Remember, people had bumper stickers on their cars.
Right.
If an accident, take me to Emmanuel.
Yeah. That was part of the media wars between OHSU and Emmanuel at the time. So, yeah.
Eventually, they split it up. Emmanuel's north and OHSU is south.
Burnside is the dividing line in Portland. Right? If you get injured above it, you go to Emmanuel, and if you below, you go to OHSU.
It's amazing. Look at the medical history that we learned today. All the questions that I have for the two of you, anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
I don't think so.
That was great.
Yeah.
I mean, when we weren't 100% certain where this was all going to go when we did it, we actually kind of had to go back through some of our records just to kind of get names and dates and people.
I blocked all that stuff out.
But this was kind of an interesting trip down memory lane.
Good.
Yeah, it's a great endeavor that you're preserving all this.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Thank you, and thank you for being part of it. We appreciate you coming out here and enjoying the day with us and sharing your story. Go ahead and let you off the hook.
Yeah.
Thank you.